Let's start with the usual introductory question. Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself and what Explorate does and your role within that?
Yeah, so hi everybody. Thanks for powering through, for the last of the day. So my name is Chris Slovak. I'm actually from the data industry, if you will, traditionally in big data and analytics, mainly in taking digital and offline data sets and merging them together in fingerprinting and advertising and all that. And I've sort of tripped my way into aviation and data sets. I always say if you get down to data, it's bits and bytes. Explorate is a blended company. I like how we're talking about that this afternoon, but we are a company that generates aerial intelligence through the ownership and delivery and building of aircraft, services, and data solutions. And we bring these three things together in a very unique way, focused on using our very unique BVLOS drone to collect data about energy transmission and energy lines. So this is energy pipelines, energy grids, things like this. Because we're using a drone, we can fly lower, slower, safer, cheaper, and we can build very predictable and high-resolution data sets, which unlock a tremendous amount of value for our partners and customers. And I think that's the other big thing. We're doing this today. We are currently flying 550 kilometers every 6 weeks for Shell in the bush of Queensland, Australia. And we're soon to be deploying the same services here in America.
So I think we have a video which can illustrate a bit about what Explorate does. Hopefully it plays.
Maybe not. It's all right. It's really cool. But what you saw there was the SCO 50. We build and operate and sell that device, or that aircraft, under the brand Swiss Drones. It is approximately 80 to 100 pound aircraft, but we can carry 40 kilograms of weight, and we have a 3-hour sortie time, and our next generation is 8 hours and about 50 kilograms. This sort of long distance and weight capabilities allow us to carry very high resolution multi-sensor payloads across these assets, and give us that resolution and quality of data that we're looking for.
So you touched on it briefly just now, but the 550 kilometer BVLOS authorization from CASA, can you give us some more color on that? Exactly, sort of. Oh, here we go.
Cool. We'll watch it. That's a LNG compressing facility, if you've ever seen one.
So I wanted, there we've seen quite a lot of the models that you are able to create with your sensors. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and particularly the high accuracy that you're able to achieve?
Yeah. So today you have this sort of massive gap between collecting data in a terrestrial means, so like a human going up with a sensor, and now you have VLOS, so using smaller drones, but really your range is a kilometer, 2 kilometers sort of max. And then you jump from way up into manned aviation with helicopters and with airplanes, or you go even further beyond and you're at satellite. And so as you go from close to the device and low, and you start going faster, further, higher, you lose quality. And the only way to keep up with quality, if you don't want to lose it, is to pay lots and lots of money for really, really big, very, very expensive sensors. And we fill the gap in the middle with BV loss. You know, flying 50 to 100 kilometers on a tick with high-end sensors, but not at like multi-millions dollars of sensors. And when we do that, because we can fly, because we're a helicopter, we can fly low and slow, we can fly in sort of that dead man's curve, but not with all the risk of a human crashing and dying. It means that we can collect data that is, 4 centimeters in terms of accuracy from a geospatial perspective, and at several thousand points of dots, if you will, when you use LiDAR, which means, we can see sort of up and underneath trees. We can see erosion happening over time at a very small level. And what that does, because we're using a drone, because we're doing it it's a supervised flying fashion, it's not fully autonomous, we use commercial pilots, and I can talk about that more why. But because we're doing these things, the data becomes very, very consistent. And when you have high quality and you have high consistency, you start to be able to move from reactive, I'm looking at it and I'm getting results and reports, to proactive. You can actually start to predict things, which means finding small problems before they become big problems, which means, reducing downtime, which means more increased production, and that's just on our customer side. But then the flip side of that is we're stopping leaks and ecological disasters and safety issues from happening before they happen. And so we think that the benefits and sort of the unique capabilities of our aircraft, that lends us to this sort of very, very accessible and repeatable data set that sort of drives this whole revolution in the way we think about asset management in the oil and gas industry.
So most operators are being pushed to deliver low-cost alternatives to manned solutions, but those often don't properly capture the value that these new solutions can provide. So how do you go about changing the narrative from cost to value?
Yeah, so I mentioned this, like I'm from enterprise sales, and you do your whole value talk. But in this industry, aviation purchasing is very rigorous and focused on, per hour, per kilometer. And I think when we get into a conversation specifically in our world, and we start talking about, well, we can reduce the cost because we burn 90% less fuel to fly the same distance using a drone. But we're creating data sets that are 600%, more in terms of better resolution and just size. So sometimes if we get into a cost comparison, it's not apples to apples. And I think when we talk to our customers, we're sort of saying, look, let's take cost aside. We know that we have to be economically performant. We can't be worth more and not produce more. But let's not focus on cost as the driving factor. Let's talk about how we use the data that we're collecting to create real impact in your business. And I can't say who it is, but we had one partner tell us that, like over the course of the last couple of years we've been working with, they believe that we've increased production on their pipeline. And this is a global export pipeline of 1% to 3%. That's real money. And if you start the conversations and we allow, and this is an industry thing that I see specifically in the drone industry, we're not talking about the total cost of ownership value that we're generating. It's not just per kilometer on fuel. We removed people and risk, and we increased better results and predictability in those results. And I think changing the narrative from cost to value is tricky, but if we as an industry do it, I think we'll be able to illustrate our value a lot better than just being the low-cost answer. That's a race to the bottom for all of us.
So you've touched on it a little already, but maybe you can speak about it with respect to drawing parallels with what was available before you guys came along. But why do traditional field data management processes or procedures need to be changed?
Well, I think the big thing you have really two big things, I guess. One, the frequency in which we can fly because of some of those cost realizations and the reduction in risk, as well as what we believe will be longer times to maintenance for drones. Like all of that means you're flying more often, and then you're flying more often and you're getting more data. And so suddenly you have a choke point when you land and you have all this data. How do you get it? I mean, I wish you had a picture of it. Like we are literally in the middle of nowhere, out in the bush, or we're in Western Texas in a giant oil field of 7,000, donkeys, or we're in Brunei in the deserts, and there's no cell coverage. Thank God for Elon and Starlink, because we're relying a lot on, data transfers through satellite. But today, like those problems don't really exist. So what people just do is they land, they literally pull an SSD card out, like put it in. I've seen this. I've literally watched someone pull an SSD card out, stick it in an envelope, and mail it to Houston. And you're like, that's crazy. It's not secure. It's not safe. It's not reliable. It doesn't scale. And now suddenly when we come along and we start actually having real, what I would call big data issues, a new path and a new process, and obviously that means cloud computing and satellite communications, they become real necessities for us to actually take action on this data. And it's gonna be a boon because it means that the data becomes more secure, it becomes more available, we can use the power of cloud computing, which means it'll be cheaper to actually process. And so this is just some of the reasons why we have to see change in the way aerial survey and aerial intelligence is done today.
So you make use of the SDO-50, Swiss Drones' aircraft, right?
Yeah.
But I'm right in thinking that your system is aircraft agnostic, and really you're more of a data company than an aviation company.
Yeah. So I think we look at the problem as sort of multimodal. In fact, we actually don't even think that the SDO is the only thing to make good decisions. If you think about it, you need to understand the environmental data. You can use satellite data layered on with your terrestrial data, layered on with the in-the-pipe data, and all these things come together. So, for example, a lot of times, you have sensors. All these companies have sensors that are measuring pressure in line. What most people don't realize is that they don't actually measure the pressure from the wellhead to the line, and that's on a little PVC pipe. And so there's situations where you don't even know that you have a problem in the pipe until the problem's so large that, it's 100, kilograms an hour type issue. It's a mega emitter, and it could be an ecological disaster. And so you need to sort of you have to marry what's flowing through the pipe and the information you're getting in the pipe with the information you can get with the information that you can get from the satellite, and use those as a layered stack to bring this asset intelligence together. And so, yes, we're building the platform with that in mind. Obviously, we are currently working with our partners to help them de-risk their manned aviation operations and data collection, through aerial intelligence. But we're definitely thinking bigger and longer term in terms of bringing all this data together.
So thinking about the asset, how do you focus on the asset and what you need to know about it versus when and how you fly?
So I think that's actually another sort of area where coming as a newbie into the oil and gas and the aviation space, I'm a data nerd. And so the first thing you do with data is you collect it and then you correlate it. Or it's actually technically collect, standardize, correlate. Everyone just sort of skips that in aerial survey today. They just sort of jump to awesome 3D models and then they just start sifting around. But the business logic, what is mostly tribal knowledge today of pipeline and grid integrity, is the person who just understands what a power line should look like. More than half the time, that's not even written down, let alone put into some logic, business logic. And so the way we look at the data set and the asset itself is that everything revolves around it, and the business rules also are attached to it. And then all the media and the content and the sensor data, everything from there is sort of the scope out versus, well, I flew and I have my content and now I'm gonna look through. And I think that change, it sets itself up really well for us to codify effectively the regulations around pipeline and grid integrity. And it also sets the stage for evidence of decision making. And why that's really important is when there is a leak and there is a fire or a disaster and this stuff does happen, you have the ability to go back in time and say, look, we saw these things and we use these rules to make these decisions to maintain that asset. that doesn't like exist today, right? Bob saw it last time he flew over the airplane, or with the airplane. He said it looked okay. That's what we have today. And so this drive to, logic and evidence decision making, what I believe it will do is not only obviously make things safer and better and all of that, but it'll also give oil and gas industry a massive opportunity to show the reduction of risk. And that has economical benefits in terms of reducing insurance and things like this. It also has socioeconomic benefits by telling and being able to prove to the public that they are actually trying to do good by us and the environment. And those are big ticket wins by sort of changing the narrative to focus on the asset and codify the rules and not just look at the data that we get after we fly, if that makes sense.
So thinking a little more philosophically now, do you think AI needs to be deployed to support humans rather than replace them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this whole kind of codification of tribal knowledge isn't going to happen overnight. Someone who's been working as a lineman on a power grid for 30 years, there's so much nuance in there. We're not just going to replace that tomorrow with AI. And so we really focus on the idea of making humans more efficient. And I think it was somebody who was like, one of the beautiful, I think it was Veronica, who was up earlier from Acumen. She said, we should think about AI as a recommendation engine. And I completely agree with that. We should use artificial intelligence to sift through the mountain of data, find the needles, put them in front of a customer and say, or the expert, and say, is this a problem? And then when that expert says yes or no, capture that and go back and use it as supervised training. So a big part of our platform strategy is to develop this feedback loop with the purposeful intention of artificial intelligence training. Effectively, like when you're in the portal and you're clicking around, you're actually doing supervised training. It doesn't look like that. Looks like you're building a report that you have to give out to your boss that, hey, the pipeline's safe, but you're actually teaching the system what to look for next time. And we think that that's a win-win for everybody. It makes your experts more efficient, means that they can do more with less. It also slowly and surely means that when that person leaves the organization, you don't lose that tribal knowledge because you've codified it, right? And that sort of knowledge transfer becomes easier, which is a big problem when you have an aging workforce, which is what we do have today, especially in oil and gas.
So for my final question, up to now we've discussed sort of what you do in terms of infrastructure, particularly pipeline inspection. But there are other use cases, and I'm sure these will open up more and more and more as we go into the future. Are there any you see right now? Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of talking about Explorate and our sort of mandate to focus on for energy and linear infrastructure. But as Swiss Drones, we are an OEM, and we sell a BVLOS capable helicopter that does helicopter-y things, cargo deliveries, search and surveillance. I mean, there's countless opportunities for it to change and fill the gap where manned aviation is maybe a little bit overkill, overpowered, or too dangerous. For example, we have a lot of conversations around fire management. We can fly at night and over a fire line, right? And we can tell people and give operational awareness to where that fire is without risking someone in a helicopter, or worse, a firefighter on the ground walking around in the dark trying to figure out where this thing is. And then within the data side of things, there's a tremendous opportunity for us to expand beyond linear into distributed assets. I think you saw at the end there, we actually did this really cool proof of concept where we flew over a massive jungle in Indonesia. That was at the end there. And then we separated the ground from the trees, and we actually calculated like the vegetation layer, and we could calculate from 1 month to next month how much growth there was. And that was actually because they wanted to calculate the carbon offsets that grew within that forest. And today, someone goes in and says, oh, this hectare has this many trees, and then they do a calculation. And a lot of the carbon offset calculations are like wildly off. We're literally measuring the leaves. So the applications are really, really extensive. We've just sort of found this kind of very specific sweet spot. And as everyone's sort of talking about with the getting ready for first flight, we're past that. We're into commercialization. So focus
and scale and proving that this is commercially viable is really, really critical to the business right now.
It's funny you say that about the counting of the trees getting an average by a hectare. It reminds me of old geography field trips where you'd throw out the quadrant and count the daisies. Well, Chris, thanks so much. It's been great having you on.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.